In this lecture, we are going to take a deep dive into the definition of data controller. We will start with what that definition is. We will review the 5 parts that we looked at in the previous lecture. And then we're going to spend some time looking at the first 2 parts: person, authority, agency, or other body, and determined. We will then conclude with some examples. So the definition of data controller is as follows: the natural or legal person, public authority, agency, or other body which, alone or jointly with others, determines the purpose and means of the processing of personal data. A little bit of extra there. Where the purpose and means of such processing are determined by union or member state law, the controller or the specific criteria for its nomination may be provided by union or member state law. You really just need to focus on the first part. And again, we've broken this into 5 different parts. Part 1, natural or legal person, public authority, agency, or other body. Part 2, determines. Part 3, alone or jointly with others. Part 4, the purposes and means. Part 5, of the processing of personal data. And so in this lecture, we're going to look at the first 2 bullets. In the next lecture, we'll look at the next 3. So person, authority, agency, or other body. Now, when it comes to natural person, here we're thinking of a human being or a group of humans. With a legal person, we're thinking of an organization. Now, if an organization appoints someone to do the data processing, it does not mean that that individual is the data controller. Instead, if that person is carrying out the processing on behalf of their organization, for example, because that's part of their responsibility, then that person is carrying out the processing activity on behalf of the legal entity, and it is still the organization that is the controller. Part 2 is determined. And what we're looking at here is, does the entity, the organization, does it have the ultimate say in why and how the data is processed? Less important are contractual designations. That is, you are going to process the data on our behalf. We looked at an example earlier where a processor had received data on behalf of the data controller, but then that processor determined for themselves the purpose and means of processing, and as a result became the data controller. So processors may become controllers if they in fact determine the purposes and means of processing that data. So let's look at a quick example. Let's say that national law obligates ABC Corporation to collect and process workers' compensation data. Well, ABC Corp is the controller here, even though the law obligates the collection and processing of that data. And when you really think about it, this is actually quite common. If you think about worker protection laws, payroll, leave entitlements, sick leave, maternity and paternity leave, for example, a lot of that data, if not all of it, is being collected in order to satisfy different employment and workers' laws. So that data is being collected as a matter of law, but it is still being collected and processed by the organization. So the organization, the place of employment in this case, is the data controller. Let's look at another example. Let's say we have XYZ Incorporated, and they use a SaaS or software as a service database to collect, process, and store their own customer data. So again, XYZ Inc., they're using a SaaS database. They are determining the database's usage, and therefore they are the controller. So it doesn't matter that my company's data is in the cloud and that the cloud just so happens to be owned by Microsoft or Amazon Web Services or Google. I am collecting that data. I am determining the purpose and means. Therefore, I am the controller. Now, the SaaS organization, whether it's Microsoft or Amazon or whoever, they are a processor because they are helping me to store that data in the cloud, okay? So I'm the controller, the cloud provider in this case is the processor. In this lecture, we looked at the first two parts of the definition of data controller. Again, the full definition: a data controller is a natural or legal person, public authority, agency, or other body that determines, alone or jointly with others, the purposes and means of the processing of personal data. Remember, when it comes to natural person, we are contrasting a natural person with a legal person. A natural person being a human being or group of humans, a legal person being an organization. Remember that an organization's appointment of a person to process the organization's data does not make that person the controller. Instead, the organization itself is the controller. The person is carrying out their duties as part of their day-to-day responsibilities. Part 2 determines. What we're looking at here is, does the entity, the organization, have the ultimate say? Do they have the decisive influence in why and how the data is processed? Remember, contractual designations are less important. What is more important is who is actually determining the purpose and means of the processing. Finally, remember that processors may become controllers if they in fact determine the purpose and means of processing.